I had just wrapped up a brutal 2-week freelance gig in Nashville. Night shoots, endless edits, barely any sleep. The client had been generous, and I was walking away with a decent paycheck and the deepest kind of burnout. My plan was simple. I'd take 3 days off, clear my head, and do the drive home to Virginia at a slower pace. I didn't have any real destination in mind, just east. I wanted quiet roads, motels with paper-thin walls, and greasy food from roadside diners. Something about those lonely stretches of highway always helped me think. On the second night of my drive, I stopped in a town that looked like it hadn't changed since the 80s, Murdoch Hollow. I only ended up there because I'd pulled off the highway looking for a gas station, but the GPS froze and my signal was toast. The place was small, one strip of road with a diner, a faded liquor store, and a sign that said, "Murdoch Hollow welcomes you, where history lives." Cute. I didn't want to risk getting too far off track, so I decided to just crash there for the night and reset my GPS in the morning. The only lodging I could find was a little family-owned spot called the Green Pines Inn. Not a chain, not modern, just a 2-story colonial-style building tucked behind a row of tall pine trees. The parking lot had 2 cars. That should have been a red flag. I walked in and rang the bell at the front desk. After a minute or two, an older woman emerged from a back room. Her name was Mrs. Kettle, and she looked like someone's grandmother who also might poison you if you talked back at dinner. She was pleasant, but there was something off in her smile. Too fixed, too patient. "I only have 1 room left," she told me, sliding a rusty brass key across the counter. "We're not exactly booming in January, but that one's all that's ready for guests." That didn't bother me. I just needed a bed and a shower. She handed me a form to sign and then told me breakfast was served at 7 a.m. sharp. I didn't plan on being around that long. The room was upstairs at the end of the hallway, room 205. The carpet in the hall smelled like old cologne and dust, and the walls were papered with faded rose patterns. Every step creaked like a warning. When I opened the door to the room, I had to push it hard. It stuck a little, like it hadn't been opened in a while. Inside, it was simple. Queen bed, floral comforter, old dresser, and a chair by the window. There was a faint smell, like damp wood or something that had once been alive and was now just still. I set my bag down and took a shower. The water was lukewarm, but the pressure was decent. After, I lay on the bed with my laptop and tried to catch up on some emails, but the Wi-Fi didn't work. Not surprising. I figured I'd just get some sleep and get out early. At around 1 a.m., I woke up suddenly. Not to a sound, but to silence. The kind that has weight. You know the kind I mean. No heater hum, no creaking pipes. Even the wind outside had stopped. Then I heard a knock. It wasn't loud. 3 soft, measured knocks on my door. I didn't move at first. I wasn't even sure I was fully awake. I waited, hoping it was part of a dream, but then I heard it again. Knock, knock, knock. I sat up, my heart already racing. I didn't speak, didn't ask, "Who's there?" or anything dumb like that. Just listened. There was no shuffle of feet, no breath, no voice. After about a minute, I slowly moved toward the door and looked through the peephole. No one was there. The hallway was empty, dimly lit by a flickering bulb at the far end. I waited. Still no sound, no movement. I thought maybe Mrs. Kettle had come to tell me something. Maybe the room had plumbing issues or some kind of routine maintenance. But at 1 a.m.? Didn't make sense. Eventually, I went back to bed, still on edge. But nothing else happened. I didn't fall asleep easily, but I did sleep. Day 2. The next morning, I went downstairs for breakfast. The dining room was empty, but the table had a full spread. Toast, eggs, cereal, orange juice. All a little too neatly arranged. Mrs. Kettle appeared and offered coffee. I asked if she had come by my room during the night. She gave me that same too-perfect smile. "Oh, no, dear," she said. "I wouldn't disturb a guest so late." I asked if anyone else was staying at the inn. She paused. "Just one other, but they keep to themselves." The way she said it made my skin crawl. Back upstairs, I packed quickly, but when I went to grab my keys from the dresser where I'd left them, they were gone. I checked my pockets, my bag, the floor. Nothing. I tore the room apart, lifted the bed, opened every drawer. Still nothing. Eventually, I had to go back downstairs and ask Mrs. Kettle if anyone had turned in a set of car keys. She gave me a tight smile and said she'd look around, told me to relax and not worry. But she didn't look like she was going to help. I had no choice but to wait. I decided to explore the inn a little, hoping to distract myself. I ended up at a side hallway past the main staircase. This part of the building was colder, darker, and clearly unused. A sign on one of the doors read, "Staff only, no entry." Naturally, I tried the handle. Locked. But the door next to it, with no sign, creaked open with a gentle push. Inside was a room identical to mine. Same layout, same furniture. But the bed was made with plastic covers, and everything was covered in dust, like no one had used it in years. Then I saw it, on the nightstand. A key ring. Mine. Just sitting there. I snatched them up and turned to leave, but my eyes caught something in the mirror on the far wall. A shape, standing in the corner behind me. I turned around. Nothing there. When I looked back at the mirror, nothing. But I swear to you, I saw it. I rushed out, ran back to my room, grabbed my bag, and left. I stopped only to toss the key on the counter in the front office. Mrs. Kettle wasn't around. As I walked to my car, I noticed something I hadn't seen before. Along the side of the building, where the pine trees grew thickest, there was a small fenced-off area, like an overgrown garden. Stone markers were scattered across it, half swallowed by the earth. Gravestones. Some were so weathered I couldn't read them, but one stood out, newer than the rest. Thomas Kettle, 1986 to 2008, forever the last guest. I drove away without looking back. When I stopped for gas 20 miles down the road, I checked my rearview mirror, and I swear I saw someone sitting in my back seat for a split second. A flash of a figure, just a silhouette. But when I turned around, there was no one. No one at all. The Lost Cabin. A true forest horror story. This happened to me when I was 19 years old. I'm 27 now, and I still think about it every time I'm near a forest. My friend Thomas and I had planned a hiking trip to celebrate the end of our second year of university. The plan was to drive from the city into the Appalachian Mountains, hike a remote trail for 2 days, and camp overnight in the woods. We'd both done short camping trips before, but never something this long or this remote. We left on a Friday morning. It was early spring and the trees were just beginning to bloom. We parked Thomas' car at a gravel pull-off near the start of the trail, hoisted our packs, and started hiking. The first day went great. We followed a marked trail, passed a couple of other hikers, and made it to the top of a ridge with an incredible view. That night, we pitched our tent in a designated camping area and cooked ramen on a small gas stove. The second day was where things got strange. We had decided to take a longer, less traveled loop trail back down the mountain. According to the map, it would connect back to the main trail about 10 miles in. We figured we had plenty of time. About 4 hours into the hike, the trail started to fade. The markers became less frequent. We should have turned back, but we kept going, thinking the trail would pick up again. It didn't. We ended up completely off trail. The terrain became rougher, dense underbrush, fallen trees, and uneven rocks. Our GPS signal was spotty, and our compass skills were mediocre at best. Still, we weren't panicking. Yet, by late afternoon, we were deep in the woods, trying to find the trail again. That's when we stumbled upon the cabin. It was hidden in a dense thicket, surrounded by tall pines and silence. The structure looked abandoned, weather-worn wood, a sagging porch, and dark windows. It was out of place, like it had been dropped there decades ago and forgotten. "Dude, what the hell is this place?" Thomas said, adjusting his pack. I walked up to the porch. The door was slightly ajar. We called out, but no answer. No sign of anyone. Curiosity got the better of us. We stepped inside. The cabin smelled like mold and damp earth. Dust floated in the beams of light from the broken windows. There were 2 rooms, one with a rusted wood stove and broken chairs, the other with an old bed and piles of torn blankets. But what really unsettled us was the writing. Etched into the wooden walls, over and over again, were names. Dozens of them. Some were carved deep, others scratched hastily. "You think this is like a guest book?" Thomas asked. I wasn't so sure. Something about the names felt desperate. Some were full names, others just initials. And below them, more etchings. "He comes when the sun sets. Don't stay after dark. He takes the ones who don't move." We looked at each other. "Let's go," I said. We left the cabin and tried to retrace our steps, but the forest seemed different, quieter. The birds had stopped singing, the wind had died down. It was as if the forest was holding its breath. We walked for over an hour, but everything looked the same. Trees, rocks, more trees. Eventually, we had to accept the truth. We were lost. Night was falling fast. We found a flat area near a large boulder and decided to set up camp. We were tired, but neither of us felt like eating. That night, I had trouble sleeping. I kept hearing things, twigs snapping, rustling leaves, faint whispers. I told myself it was just animals, just the wind, until I heard footsteps. They were slow, deliberate, crunching leaves, pausing, then crunching again. I nudged Thomas. "Wake up, someone's out there." He groaned, but then froze as the footsteps got closer. We stayed absolutely still, barely breathing. Something or someone was circling our tent. I could hear it brushing against the fabric, a low, guttural breathing sound. Not human, not animal. Then, silence. We waited for what felt like hours. Eventually, we drifted into an uneasy sleep. The next morning, we found footprints, bare, human-looking, but larger, wider. They circled our tent multiple times. We packed up in silence and started walking in the direction we hoped was back to the main trail. About an hour in, we found another marker. Relief washed over us. We followed the path, and by mid-afternoon, we were back at Thomas's car. But as we approached the car, we noticed something. Our names were scratched into the rear window, not written with a finger, etched like with a knife or a nail. "What the hell?" Thomas muttered, backing away. Below our names, 3 words. "Don't come back." We never told anyone, not our friends, not our families. What could we say? A month later, I tried looking up the cabin. Old maps, online forums, local records, nothing. It doesn't exist, not officially. But sometimes, when I'm alone, I think about those names on the cabin wall. I wonder how many of them got out, and how many never left, and if whatever was out there is still waiting. This happened when I was 17, during my last year of high school in a quiet suburb in Ohio. My name is Maya, and back then, I was one of those teens who kind of flew under the radar. I wasn't unpopular, but I wasn't exactly the center of attention either. I just liked to do my own thing, hang out with my friends, sketch, listen to music, and watch horror movies. Ironic, given what happened. It all started a few days after New Year's, when everyone was still easing back into school after winter break. I remember that because my mom had just made me pack away our holiday decorations, and I was in a weird mood. Not sad, just sort of reflective. The kind of mood where the snow outside feels a little too quiet and the lights in your room a little too dim. Anyway, I had this route I took every morning to get to school. It was a 15-minute walk through a park that cut between rows of old houses. Not many kids used that path, which I liked. It was peaceful. One Monday morning, I was running late, so I ended up leaving home closer to 8:15 a.m. instead of my usual 7:55. As I was walking through the park, I noticed a boy standing by the tree line near the swing set. He looked about my age, maybe a year older, and he was wearing this oversized yellow hoodie with the hood up. He was just watching me. Not smiling, not looking away. Just still. At first, I figured maybe he was waiting for someone or just being weird. It's not uncommon for high schoolers to act edgy. But something about him felt off. Not dangerous, not yet. Just strange. The way he stood was too still, too rigid. His face was partially hidden, but I remember thinking his skin looked pale, like almost gray under the shadows of the hood. I kept walking, and when I passed him, he didn't move, didn't even glance away. I didn't hear footsteps, no rustling, nothing. That same day, he was outside again after school. This time, he was leaning against a fence that lined the edge of the park. Same yellow hoodie, same posture, same stare. I told myself it was just a coincidence. Maybe he lived around there. But then it happened again the next day, and the next, and the next. I tried changing up my schedule, left 10 minutes earlier, took a longer way home. But it didn't matter. Wherever I went, eventually, he was there. Yellow hoodie, still as a statue, watching. I stopped walking to school altogether after that week. My mom thought it was just because of the cold, and I didn't correct her. She offered to drive me when she could, but she worked early shifts at the hospital, so I started asking my friend Serena to pick me up instead. She didn't mind. She only lived a few blocks away. One Friday night, later that month, Serena and I were at my place watching a movie. Just a cheesy rom-com. We needed a break from final stress. My mom was doing a double shift, so we had the house to ourselves. Around 10:30, Serena left to go home. I walked her to the front door, waved goodbye, locked it behind her, and went to grab a snack from the kitchen. When I came back upstairs and turned off the lights in my room, I saw him again. He was standing across the street under the flickering street light, not moving, just standing there. There was no reason for anyone to be out there at that hour in this neighborhood, especially not wearing a bright yellow hoodie in sub-zero temperatures. It didn't make sense. I closed the curtains and sat on my bed, heart pounding in my ears. I thought about calling my mom, but she was likely in the middle of a shift. Instead, I called Serena and told her what I saw. "Okay, that is super creepy," she said. "Are you sure it's him?" "Yes," I said. Same hoodie, same posture, same freaking stillness. Serena offered to come back and stay over, but I told her I'd be fine. I stayed up most of the night with the lights on. Eventually, I fell asleep. By morning, he was gone. That would have been the end of it. Just a weird, creepy series of sightings, except things started getting worse. Way worse. A week later, my mom was out again. I was home alone, scrolling through my phone on the couch around 11 p.m. when I heard a thud against the window. Not loud, just a dull impact, like something soft had been tossed at it. I froze, got up, pulled the curtain back just enough to peek. Nothing. I turned on the porch light. Still nothing. I figured maybe a bird flew into the glass or something. But then I went upstairs to my room, and on my window, which was on the second floor, there was a smear, a greasy, smudged handprint on the glass. It was huge. No ladder, no footprints in the snow outside, no explanation. Just that handprint. I didn't sleep that night. From there, things spiraled. The lights in our backyard started turning on by themselves. One night, the power cut out entirely for about 20 minutes. We later found out someone had pulled the main breaker switch outside, and then I started hearing whispers. Yeah, I know how that sounds, like something out of a ghost story. But these weren't voices in my head. They were real, audible, faint like someone murmuring just beyond the door. Always just low enough that I couldn't make out the words. I tried convincing myself I was paranoid, stress from school, hormones, too many scary stories. But deep down, I knew. I knew something wasn't right. Then came the night I'll never forget. February 3rd. I was home alone again. My mom was out with her boyfriend, someone new she'd started seeing. Around 12:45 a.m., I woke up to the sound of scraping, like fingernails on wood. It was coming from inside the house. I sat up, completely still, and strained to hear. There it was again. Scrape, scrape, scrape. It was coming from downstairs. I grabbed my phone and tiptoed toward the bedroom door. I opened it just a crack, enough to peek out. The hallway was dark, and then I saw movement at the bottom of the stairs. He was in the house, the boy in the yellow hoodie, standing in the middle of the living room, facing the stairs, as if he knew I was there. My heart slammed against my chest so hard I could hear it in my ears. I backed away, shut my door silently, and locked it. Then I called 911. The dispatcher stayed on the phone with me while I crouched in the corner of my room, shaking, trying to stay silent. The police arrived in under 10 minutes. They searched the house and found the back door pried open with a crowbar. He'd broken in, but he was gone. No sign of him anywhere. Nothing stolen, nothing out of place, except one thing. On my bed was a single piece of lined notebook paper. Written in messy, childlike scrawl were the words, "I told you I knew where you lived." I had never told him anything. I had never even spoken to him, apart from that one awkward interaction at the park. And yet here he was, breaking into my house, sneaking into my room, leaving messages. The cops filed a report. They asked if I knew him, if I had a stalker. I said no. They dusted for prints but didn't find anything useful. We installed cameras, got a new security system. My mom switched to day shifts. I started getting rides everywhere, and he never came back. At least, not that I know of. It's been 3 years since then, and I still have nightmares about it. Sometimes I wake up sweating, convinced I heard the scrape of fingernails again, or that I saw a flash of yellow out the window. I still don't know who he was. No one from school matched the description. No one ever saw him again. But every time I drive past that old park, I catch myself glancing at the swing set, just to make sure he's not there, because part of me believes he's still watching. This happened when I was 24. I had just moved to northern Michigan for a new job, managing the night shift at a roadside motel. It was the kind of place you'd see in movies set in rural nowhere. A U-shaped building, flickering neon sign, and rooms that hadn't been updated since the early 90s. I needed the job. I was broke and they offered on-site lodging for free. That should have been a red flag. The manager, a man in his 60s named Carl, gave me a tour and handed me a single brass key. He said my room was 1A, closest to the office, and the job was simple. Check in late guests, keep the place quiet, and do hourly walks around the building. Easy, right? The first couple of weeks were uneventful. Quiet, even. The motel was in a forested area, and some nights we wouldn't get a single guest. I'd spend hours watching TV behind the front desk, occasionally wandering around with a flashlight, peering into empty rooms and the thick woods that pressed against the back of the property. But eventually, weird things started happening. The first time was about 2 a.m. on a Sunday. I was halfway through a microwave burrito when the bell above the lobby door jingled. A man walked in, pale and damp, like he'd just been pulled from a lake. He looked disoriented and didn't say a word, just slid a $100 bill across the counter. "Room for the night?" I asked. He nodded once. His eyes never left mine. I handed him the key to 4B, made him sign the check-in sheet, and watched as he walked down the hallway without luggage, shoes, or a word. That should have been weird enough, but when I looked back down at the ledger, his signature was just a wavy scribble. No name, no legibility. By morning, the key was on the counter again. Room empty, sheets untouched. No signs anyone had stayed there. I asked Carl about it later that day. "Oh, we get types like that sometimes," he said with a wave of his hand. "Drifters. Don't worry about them. Just part of the job." That was the beginning. A few nights later, around 3 a.m., I was doing my usual walk around the back of the motel when I saw movement in the woods. Not just some rustling, but full silhouettes. Figures. At least 3 of them. They stood just past the tree line, not moving, not making a sound. I stood there for a while, flashlight aimed at them. My hand was shaking so bad the beam jittered like a strobe light. And then they turned around, at the same time, and walked deeper into the woods. I ran back inside and locked the office door. Things escalated from there. Guests would check in only to disappear. Rooms would go cold even when the heat was blasting. Once I found muddy footprints leading from the woods straight into room 7C, and then nothing. No exit prints, no guest, just a room that smelled like wet earth and pine needles. I started to notice that Carl never stayed after sunset. He would leave right before the sky went dark, mumbling something about letting the night manager handle it. When I asked why he never worked nights, he just laughed and said, "Because I want to wake up the next morning." The worst night was about a month in. A woman came in, shaking, soaked from the rain, her hands covered in scratches. She looked like she'd been running for miles. She begged me to let her stay without checking in. No paperwork, no name. I gave her a key, no questions asked. 10 minutes later, the lobby phone rang. Static, then a whisper. "Room 8A, help her." The line went dead. I ran to 8A with my flashlight and master key. The door was wide open, light on inside, but the woman was gone. The bed was soaked. Not with water, but blood. A small pool of it, right where someone's neck would be. No one checked out. No one reported it. By morning, the room was spotless again. I called the police once. Just once. Told them someone had broken into one of the rooms and left a pile of bones under the bed. They came out, searched the room, and found nothing. The bones were gone. They gave me a look like I was wasting their time or high and left. I started documenting everything. I kept a notebook under the counter. Every strange guest, every sound I couldn't explain, every figure in the woods. Over time, it wasn't just guests. The building itself started to change. Doors would be unlocked when I knew I'd secured them. TVs would turn on to static in rooms with no guests. Once, every alarm clock in the building went off at exactly 2:43 a.m. I checked. It wasn't a power surge. It wasn't a glitch. Something was trying to send a message. I finally confronted Carl. I told him I needed to quit. He sighed deeply, like he'd been through this before. "I understand," he said, "but just know if you leave, they might follow you. They don't like when people quit." I moved out the next morning. Left everything behind. My clothes, my laptop, even my car. Took a bus out of town and never looked back. It's been 5 years. I still get anonymous postcards every few months. No return address. Just a picture of the motel on the front, and on the back, a time and date. The times always fall in the dead of night. 3:11 a.m., 2:56 a.m., 4:09 a.m. The dates? Every single one corresponds to a night. I wake up gasping, covered in sweat, convinced that someone is standing in the corner of my room, just watching. I don't know what I brought with me when I left, but I don't think it stayed behind. Whatever manages the night now still remembers me, and it's just waiting for me to come back. It had been 5 years since I left that motel in northern Michigan, but not a single night passed where I didn't think about it. Not because I missed it. Number it was because something from that place had followed me. It started small. Little things like the smell of pine needles in my apartment when none were around, or waking up at 3:11 a.m. on the dot for weeks in a row with no explanation. Then came the postcards, always the same, an old photo of the motel, time-stamped. No message, no signature. Sometimes they were postmarked from cities I'd never even visited, but I knew what they were. Reminders, warnings, invitations. I moved 5 times in 3 years, burned every postcard, deleted every photo, even changed my name in a desperate attempt to disconnect. But nothing worked. Last November, things escalated. I had just moved into a small 1-bedroom apartment in a quiet part of Illinois. No neighbors on either side, the kind of peace I thought I needed. Then, one night, I came home from work to find the apartment door slightly ajar. I froze. I know I locked it that morning. I always do. I pushed the door open and stepped inside. At first glance, everything looked normal. Then I saw it, a single motel key on the floor. Room 1A. It was my old key, the same brass one Carl gave me when I first started. Same chipped number, same cold metal feel. I didn't take it with me. I left it behind. I wanted to scream, but nothing came out. I grabbed the key, threw it in a drawer, and tried to convince myself it was a cruel prank or a hallucination. But deep down, I knew it wasn't over. A few days later, the lights started flickering. My microwave turned on by itself. I heard footsteps pacing in my hallway at night, but every time I checked, nothing. One night, I was watching TV when the screen suddenly went black. Static buzzed. Then, from the speaker, a familiar voice spoke. "You're late for your shift." I turned off the TV, yanked the plug from the wall. Didn't sleep that night. The next morning, I got a text. No number, just coordinates. When I looked them up, my stomach turned. It was the motel. But here's the thing. I had already read an article that it had burned down 2 years ago in an accidental fire. The cause was never found, so how was I getting messages from it? I was done running. That weekend, I rented a car and drove 10 hours north. The GPS led me deep into the woods to where the motel should have been. But when I arrived, the land was empty. No ruins, no ashes, just a cracked parking lot overtaken by weeds and a broken neon sign half buried in the dirt that read, "Vac NC." I sat there for a long time. Just as I was about to turn back, something caught my eye. Light flickering deep in the woods. I followed it. After walking 15 minutes, I stopped in my tracks. The motel was standing, fully intact, lit up. It looked exactly like the night I left it. Only this time there were no cars in the lot, no sounds, just that dim neon buzz and a thick silence that made my ears ring. I walked toward the office. The door creaked open on its own. Inside, everything was just like I remembered. My old chair, the counter, the logbook. Even my notebook, still under the desk, dusty but untouched. But there was something new. A folded note placed neatly beside the guest ledger. It read, "Clock in." I should have left. I wanted to leave, but I sat down in the chair. At exactly 11 p.m., the bell above the door rang. A man walked in. Same soaked clothes, same pale face, same silence. It was the first guest I ever checked in. He slid a $100 bill across the counter, and I instinctively reached for the key to 4B. But when I opened the drawer, there were dozens of keys now, each labeled with names I recognized. Tina Morris, Derek L. Paulson, L. Ramirez, names of people who had disappeared. Guests I never saw leave, their names now engraved in brass. I handed him a key. He left. I followed him to the hallway. But the second he turned the corner, he vanished. Room 4. B was gone. Just a blank wall. That night blurred. Guests kept arriving, silent, expressionless, handing me crumpled cash and blank stares. I tried to leave more than once, but the door led to the same hallway, over and over again. I was stuck, trapped in an endless night. Time didn't move the way it should. Every clock in the motel froze at 3:11 a.m. My phone was dead. My watch stopped. At one point, I heard Carl's voice whisper from the vents, "You're doing great. You're one of us now." I screamed until my throat tore. I don't know how I got out. Maybe I passed out. Maybe they let me go. I woke up in my car, parked on the shoulder of a highway 20 miles from the motel's coordinates. The motel wasn't there anymore. The land was empty again. But the key to room 1A was in my lap. It's sitting in my drawer as I write this. I've tried mailing it away. It always returns. I tried melting it. Didn't work. I even buried it 30 feet underground in a forest preserve. The next morning, it was in my pocket. It's not just the key. Lately, people have started to disappear from my apartment building. One neighbor gone. Then another. No noise. No signs of struggle. Just gone. And now my hallway smells like pine needles. My microwave turns on every night at 3:11 a.m. The TV flickers, even when unplugged. I think the motel isn't in Michigan anymore. I think it followed me. Or maybe I brought it here. All I know is I can feel it getting closer. The lobby's almost rebuilt. I can hear the bell ringing in my dreams again. And last night, someone slid a key under my door. Not room 1A this time. Room U.